any band that has been around for decades where you can always find someone who's like, man, you missed it. Last year was so cool. It was still cool last year. Oh, Burning Man, yeah. Should have been here yesterday. It was cool up until yesterday. Now it's terrible.
I heard that about Burning Man. We're like, it's all the celebrities now. And then I asked my friend who goes like all the time. He goes, no, there's just more celebrities, but
it's still fine.
Like 50,000 people or more there. It's like, it doesn't matter if there's 80 celebrities.
Yeah, it's a city.
Yeah, yeah. Have you ever been there?
Yeah, I have. I just came back for my first time back in almost a decade.
What, this past year?
Yeah, I just got back a few weeks ago.
How was it?
It was excellent. It was excellent, and it's changed a lot.
What's the difference in 10 years?
The difference in 10 years is that cottage industries have popped up for Burning Man. So the technology and a variety related to, say, LEDs, what people can do with their own clothing, what people can do relatively inexpensively with art cars is so beyond anything I could have imagined 9 years ago.
What art cars? You mean the ones they're putting out to the...
Are cars that are approved. And when I say approved, that also kind of foreshadows something we could talk about, which is Burning Man has turned into a very much Black Rock City, as they would call it, legitimate city with infrastructure and rangers and law enforcement and procedures. But the art cars,
they have rules now, right?
They have to with that number of people. And the art cars are these mobile art pieces that might be for instance, a gigantic high top Converse shoe that travels around on four wheels. I saw a gigantic ghost from Pac-Man.
As an art car?
As an art car.
Wow. So has to run away from it? That must be great when you're on drugs.
I think it's very binary. It's either great or it's the most terrifying thing you've ever seen.
Yeah, but that's what I mean by great. Like it feeds you an adventure. Yeah. Dude, we were literally chased by ghosts.
Oh, yeah.
Can't explain it.
I spent 32 hours, I had 32 hours blocked out. I ended up doing slightly less as a volunteer for something called Zendo at Burning Man this year, which is a psychedelic harm reduction offshoot of MAPS, which is a 501c3 mostly focused on MDMA therapy.
I know those guys.
All right. Yeah. And so at Zendo, you get to see, as a sitter at least, which was my function, people who are seeing the great on usually the downward swing of things.
Wait, what do you mean it's a sitter? Like it's a medical tent?
It is a better way to put it would be they have labeled it peer support. What that means is people will bring their friends in who are having psychotic breaks or whatever the emotional, psychological, subjective experience is, and they will go through a medical screen. So if they exhibit, for instance, extremely high body temperature or any of their vitals are off kilter, they'll be escalated to medical. But if it is a psychological / emotional crisis and not a physiological crisis,
which is most of the time. Probably.
A lot of the time. Depends on the substance, which sometimes can't be identified, which is those are the really scary cases. But if it's LSD, which is in the cases that I dealt with, which included couples but also people who were by themselves, it's 90+% of the time. In my experience, it was LSD. Yeah. Because you have people going to an environment that already breaks people. I mean, it is so overstimulating. You have excessive temperatures, both hot and cold. You have sleep deprivation. You have dehydration. And you have relationships blowing apart left and right. And then you add in lots of nudity, lots of drugs. Of course, things are going to go sideways. And you have people who've never done drugs.
Relationships going sideways must happen all the time.
All the time. Yeah. All the time. And then you have someone who decides to do drugs, 200 micrograms as their first ever foray into LSD. Not surprisingly, doesn't always turn out very well.
Yeah. Dude, I love it when I get drugs now and people give me some. They now say the mic's on there. Like they'll palm me something. I'm like, that's like 200 mics. I'm like, okay. And I'll look like, yep, cool. Thank you for telling me that. That's too much to do.
Yeah. Good to know. I will. Yeah, exactly. I will not do a Camelback of tequila.
The problem is splitting those is like you try to get scissors or like nail clippers to split them, but it's not even. So you're like, this is between 100 or it's really between 80 and 120.
And,
so
if it's dry, which it almost certainly is, you're like, where did the actual drop land on this?
Oh, yeah.
Not sure.
Yeah.
Maybe I just gave you 10 of the 200 and I'm taking 190 or vice versa.
Yeah. So what do you have to sit with them and just say, everything's great, the world is good?
There's mandatory volunteer training beforehand and there are guidelines. Zendo does a very good job and there are other organizations that do this at various festivals. The legality of it or the incentives for event producers not to use psychedelic harm reduction is really tragic because if you look at the RAVE Act and other legislation, event producers, if they allow harm reduction services, are admitting that there is drug use at their event. and
Then they're liable.
Exactly. It increases their liability. It's really fucking ridiculous.
You know what they do in China? If you help somebody, if you see somebody get hit by a car and you help them up, that's legally, that's you saying, I must have done something. Why else would I be helping?
Wow.
Yeah, so everyone just leaves people to die.
That's awful. Yeah. So the training is really, it's very basic. I've been spending the last few years looking very deeply at scientific research at Hopkins and other places focused on a lot of these compounds. So I've been paying more attention to the protocols and the formats and the sessions and how they guide. But the objective for Zendo is not to guide per se, but to talk people or listen to people to get them through the experience, because it's very minimal, meaning it's 3 to 4 hours of training. They talk about guiding or leading people, talking people through and not down, right? So an example of how they might instruct a person to manage a situation, assuming it's not a really volatile, violent situation, and those do come up. Those need to be referred to people who are more experienced within the group, given whatever shift you're a part of. I always was part of the midnight to 8 a.m. shift, which tends to be the gnarliest kind of ER shift. I'll give you one example. So what is talking through and not down? If you have someone who comes in, and I'm by no means an expert at this, but have read enough to make things up that sound plausible.
Yeah.
But
I don't think there are any experts on this.
There are.
I think there's people who just have more experience.
Experts, but it's very hard for them to talk publicly because they then implicate themselves for continued use or distribution of things. But an example would be somebody comes in and they've used something like LSD or a dissociative of some other type that has led them to feel very paranoid. And they come in and they are looking around and they say, my campmates are trying to record my voice so they can use it against me later. Something like that, which happens a lot.
That seems normal.
Yeah, seems normal. That happens a lot on many of these compounds.
Oh, especially with phones now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Everybody has a camera and a phone and a video.
Yeah, and so you see somebody texting or they're taking a selfie, like, what are you doing?
Or you see a light and you think it's a camera light.
Yeah, or they're actually recording you.
Or they are recording you, and they would come in, they say something like that, and one might be inclined to lay out the facts and to talk them down and prove that is in fact not happening. And what you see happen in an environment like that, if you try to talk fact, is they say, I knew you wouldn't believe me. And you're one of them,
right.
And it doesn't help at all. Whereas if you were to just reflect it back and say something like, wow, that sounds really hard, tell me more about that. You're not validating their hallucination, but you're not negating it either. And then you just get them talking. And as I'm sure you've experienced, these feelings tend to come and go in waves. And so you get them to keep talking for, say, 2 minutes, they write it out, and then that ceases to become a problem.
And the thing is, you're positive that's true. Whatever you have in your head. It's not like, sure. I think it might be. It's like, no, it is. I can't explain it to you, but I know what I saw.
Yeah, and if you didn't reason your way into that, it's going to be very hard for someone to reason you out of it, particularly in that state.
Yeah.
So if they go, wow, that sounds really hard, and you're empathetic, tell me more about that, and then someone's like, oh my God, you're the first person who's actually listening. And then they can start to write it out. And even if it's, let's say with LSD, a potentially 8 to 12 hour experience, maybe you just need to get them past hour 3 and they came in at hour 2, right?
Right.
Which is very likely going to be the case.
And get back on the good path.
Yeah.
Of like having a good time.
Exactly. Or just get them to a point where they can go to sleep.
Oh, yeah.
Easier with some things than others.
My friend Kurt, his drug dealer always gave him with mushrooms or acid, gave him Xanax also. So he could like pull
Here's the escape switch.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are definitely are ways to go about it. We would not be in a situation like that, or at least the sitters would not be equipped to make a decision like that.
Dude, I got to take that training. I'm constantly guiding people through rough patches on psychedelics. And I'm always like, I don't really know.
Yeah, there are very few resources out there. MAPS does have a number of decent resources. There is one called, I think, the Manual for Psychedelic Peer Support, which is a book they published. It's a paperback that has some useful case studies in it, actual field studies of real incidents that they cover. There's another book called The Secret Chief about someone named Leo Zeff, who was quite famous in the underground, who guided thousands of sessions using different substances, and was one of the first people to really use what they referred to as Adam then, which was MDMA. And so a lot of the protocols that...
Adam them?
No, Adam was referred to as Adam then, meaning at that point in time, which was code for MDMA.
Okay.
And there are some decent resources out there. It was a positive experience. I was really glad that I did it.
Neat. Did you get a chance to like also go do drugs? You know what I mean? Like,
I had plenty of time. I was there for a full week, which was the longest I've ever been there. So I had plenty of time to get into trouble and do whatever I wanted to do.
All right, that's good.
No shortage of oddity and craziness to get involved with.
That's good. My friend Moshe goes every year. He's been going since he was like 17, but he's sober. And I'm like, and then now he's like in a monogamous relationship. I'm like, what's there for you? And he was like, I kind of run things. It's fun, art cars and stuff. He like says like the art's nice.
Yeah, I have met a number of people at Burning Man who are stone cold sober and go every year.
Yeah. Wow.
I at Burning Man don't personally consume all too much in terms of substances. I'm not against it, and I'm certainly not sober the entire time, but it is so overstimulating and there are so many uncontrolled variables that if you're really going to be pushing it, it's certainly, I don't think, the right environment to try something you've never used before.
Yeah, it certainly is the right one.
Is not.
Is not?
Is not the right environment.
Why? It's a giant playground.
It is a playground / potential house of horrors. So you should have, I think, some mileage on any substance that you use there.
Interesting.
But I'm also very, in a lot of ways, very conservative with this kind of thing.
Yeah, people always ask me, like, what if I freak out? And my answer is like, yeah, it might happen. Who cares? It will be fine. You're not going to stay that way. So a freak out's okay.
A lot of people are fine. Some people do stay that way.
No way. That's urban myth.
It is not urban myth.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's more prevalent.
Schizophrenia shit.
Yeah, it's more prevalent in people who have a family history of schizophrenia, like my cousin by marriage, actually.
Really?
Yeah, he sort of pierced the veil and did not go back.
Damn.
Yeah.
Do you think that's schizophrenia stuff? Because whenever people ask, and I tell them that too, I'm like, if there's history of schizophrenia, don't. Otherwise, fucking go for it. But like,
yeah.
There's. Do you think that they would have broken anyway?
The general feeling or opinion that I've run into when speaking with scientists who think a lot about the adverse events, if they're structuring studies, would say that it is likely it just accelerated the onset of a schizophrenic or a schizophrenic split that would have occurred sooner or later, but it was expedited by using.
Yeah, I wonder how they're going to deal with that, because I know the more they try to put it into like, this is just like medicine. They're trying to like separate the psilocybin from the mushrooms, and you know, where it's like we can treat people with this, but that shit's always still there. That psychedelic break. They would screen for schizophrenia, and there would be contraindications, as there would be with a lot of medications. So for a long time they were screening out for, say, bipolar disorder in studies, but it may turn out that in current and upcoming studies, both in the U.S. at places like Hopkins and in the U.K. at places like Imperial College and elsewhere, that psilocybin, it has tremendous applications for treatment-resistant depression. So it may turn out that what they screened out is in fact one of the what they need
conditions that could plausibly benefit tremendously from psilocybin. Yeah,
John Hopkins is one of like maybe them and NYU are like the top two.
Yeah, Hopkins has, as I understand it, by a factor of something like 10, the highest number of supervised sessions with psilocybin in the U.S. Yeah, NYU is doing some great work. There's going to be some work done at Yale. I know there are quite a few universities. I believe UCLA is doing some work. It's exciting. It's really exciting.
Yeah, it is.
MDMA is kind of off to the races. Psilocybin still has.
They're starting to put stuff. Yeah, MDMA, because they keep calling MDMA. And they're like real. I've talked to those guys on the phone before, the mask people, and I'm like, "Do you guys try not to call it Molly? Like, we never call it Molly. We don't want it being associated with its normal use."
Yeah, totally. Which is smart on their part.
Yeah, like, we have to call this the actual like scientific name. Yeah, but John Hopkins, man, if you were looking for a school to go to study psychedelics and play lacrosse, that is the number one choice.
Right, and eat crab cakes. Yeah, you're in the right place. Yeah, they have some really fantastic researchers, and some of the results, the outcomes they're seeing in their studies are just
the depression
incredible.
Stuff.
Depression, smoking cessation, nicotine addiction.
Really?
Oh my God, they're seeing
smoking cessation.
Yeah, which I mean, nicotine. It's right up there. It's, of course, not quite as hairy, but a very, very powerful addiction.
I was in Croatia, just for a week after a bunch of work for a month, and just lying in a beach, just fucking doing nothing, you know. And I kept like rolling cigarettes, which I don't smoke. My friends in Scotland, I just come from, all do spliffs, so I was like, I'll have it's my only option for weed. Yeah. And then it got in me, and now I'm back. I've been back for 2 weeks almost, and every time somebody smokes, I'm like, I won't. No, I can't. Yeah. But it's still in me.
It's a really, really, it's a powerful molecule. Very, very hard for people to quit. And I want to say that in this particular study, and they may have done follow-ups to expand it at this point, but the sort of state-of-the-art pharmaceutical that they use for smoking intervention plus therapy had something like this may not be the exact number. People can look it up very easily. Something like 27% were still abstaining from smoking like 6 months later. When you combine the therapy with something like 3 sessions of psilocybin, each of which, let's just call it, lasts 4 to 7 hours. Wait,
hold on. When you say the therapy, you mean like they're telling you get off smoking?
Yeah, exactly. They would have ongoing therapy, and people are going into the study with the intention of quitting smoking.
Okay.
But let's just say that the state of the art without psilocybin is 27% or so successful at the 6-month point after cessation of the study, and then with psilocybin, something like 80%. It is incredibly high by comparison. And you do see, if you look back at some of the older research with, say, LSD, you see, and they need to improve the design of those studies and replicate them, but you do see at least some preliminary data that would point to similar results with alcoholism and many different types of obsessive compulsive, or I should say obsessive thought patterns or behavioral patterns. And what's so exciting to me is that people are beginning to, or some people are beginning to theorize that there is this unified theory of certain types of mental illness where, let's just say, OCD, chronic depression, chronic anxiety, anorexia, that these may all be variations of the same thing. And that when you use something like psilocybin, that you deactivate, in part, what they're calling the default mode network, which represents portions of the brain that are very, very active in those conditions, and when you're very self-referential or stuck in the future or in the past. So it's an exciting time. I mean, these studies are finally getting funded.
It does really help you. I mean, with that ego, I never understood it until I was doing that stuff, where it's like, it takes you out of yourself and then just lets you look at yourself, knowing everything about, Tim or Ari that there is, but not having any connection to him.
Yeah, having that observer status. Yeah. It's strange.
And then you go like, oh, I smoke too much. Or like, oh, I'm shitty to that friend. I shouldn't be like that.
Yeah.
Or like, I shouldn't be his friend. Whatever it is, but like, just see it for what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. If anybody out there,
I think it got me off my depression.
Yeah.
Doing mushrooms.
When was that?
Probably like maybe 10 years ago. No. I got off pills maybe 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. But I was taking pills, but also doing mushrooms.
Yeah.
But the mushrooms made me like, I don't know, just help me see things clearly.
How often were you using them?
Maybe 6 months to a year.
Once every 6 months?
Yeah.
A year?
Yeah. Just big trips with my friends, but then it was like, I would just come out of that like being clear about stuff. Yeah. It
is. It can be amazingly clarifying. I mean, it's the analogy I've used with some friends who have asked me is that it's kind of like when you have your computer running and you're like, why the fuck is my computer so slow? And then you're like, oh wait, like this is backing up. I have 20 tabs open. All right, at some point you just have to do a power reboot.
Yeah.
And
it really is like wiping the slate clean for a second.
Yeah,
it's a little brain vacation.
Yeah, and certainly you gotta mind the details of being safe with that stuff. But from a toxicity standpoint, if you are actually ingesting what you think you are ingesting for, say, psilocybin, it's the benefit to risk ratio in terms of toxicities. Just it's wild. I mean, it's really, really wild.
My theory is nothing bad ever happens to anybody on mushrooms. Acid, you get a little bit more, but like besides the psychedelic breaks.
Yeah. Besides the psychotic breaks.
Yeah, besides those few. But like once you're in, you're okay. Once you're taking them, that's going to hit you out regardless. But like nobody gets hit by cars. Nobody gets like, you might get arrested, but you'll be fine the next day. You might lose your phone.
In fairness, people can get themselves into trouble if they are not in a controlled environment. I took a break from psychedelics for 10 years because I came out of a trip standing in the middle of the road with headlights coming at me.
Wow.
That's dangerous.
But can I just point out that you were not hit by those cars? That's why everything was fine?
In that case, it was. I still think...
Every story I hear is about something almost happening.
Well, but you have to keep in mind also that survivorship bias, right? Like dead people aren't on your podcast talking about it.
Yeah. Oh, I can't wait for the podcast once I die. I see all the people in hell that are like, I've been seeing some inconsistencies with what you're talking about. But you're right. There's a lot of like set and settings. So like Burning Man would be like, fuck. Well, your girlfriend's like, I'm going to try your gangbang for the first time. And then you're like, no, I'm not feeling right. She's like, maybe the wrong time.
Your friend's like, want some acid for the first time? Sure. Do a normal or triple pull? I'll do triple pull. Oh boy, here we go.
Yeah. Yeah. Rolf actually, that's one of the things I read with him, where he was like talking about drugs when you're traveling.
Yeah.
He was like, dude, shit's already stimulating enough. You don't really need them at this point. You need them for your regular weekend. But like, you're seeing some temple that's 8,000 years old.
Yeah,
like,
you're in Angkor Wat. You're fine.
Yeah,
Just soak that in.
Yeah. Although my other friend said who was like living out in Myanmar for a while.
Yeah.
So once you live out there, you get a feel of how to do everything.
Yeah.
And so he went to Angkor Wat and he was like, just bribed the guards to let him in late.
Yeah.
And he got some opium and then rolled a joint with opium down the middle. And he was like, it was the best. It was like watching the sunset.
I can see how that would be amazing. I can see how that would be really stunning.